Dave Beynon.
Wow.
We love, we always love meeting the authors who write the books we love, but it's especially great when you actually know this person already and you feel like you're kind of with them on their journey.
Oh.
So yes, please join me in welcoming Dave Beynon.
Well, thank you very much, Roxanne. It's wonderful that you host something like this for someone like me.
Oh.
And so I've got a bit of a sore throat, so I'll read as much as I can, and when I can't, I'll throw it over to somebody else, maybe. No. I've picked some sections from the story to read, and the story is called The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife, and it's in Tesseracts 17. Now, the Tesseracts series of books have been coming out. There have actually been 18 Tesseract books. This is the 18th version of it. And so each year, Tesseracts Publishing got together and got an anthology of what they say is the best, which is kind of nice, the best in Canadian speculative fiction. And somebody asked me the other day, well, isn't all fiction speculative? You know, isn't that the definition? And I said, well, kind of, but the difference between fiction and speculative fiction is that fiction is anything that you make up. Speculative fiction is usually something that you make up that couldn't actually happen because there's an element in it that's either supernatural or it's using a science that we don't yet have or something like that. So when they talk about speculative fiction, it's usually horror, fantasy, or science fiction. Those are the broad terms. So Tesseracts, so the Lighthouse Keeper's Wife. Shall I start reading?
Yes.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start a little into the story. It takes place in 1906 at a lighthouse up in Misery Bay on Manitoulin Island. And this particular lighthouse keeper is a very young man who's moved up there. He was warned that he would be lonely, but he didn't believe that he'd be lonely, but he has become lonely. So he's sent away for a mail-order bride. And where we pick up the story, his mail-order bride has just stepped off of the steamer on the docks of at South Baymouth.
For this place?
William rushed forward with a bouquet of wildflowers.
What are they doing?
Drawing closer, his steps faltered. The young woman's dark oval eyes met his, and she managed an awkward smile. William bit his lip and looked away. This wasn't what he had asked for at all. He passed her the flowers a little more roughly than he figured was probably appropriate. I'm William Jones, he said, noticing a note pinned to the woman's coat. I am Mayrong May Han, traveling to South Baymouth, Manitoulin Island. I am marrying William Jones, keeper, Misery Bay Lighthouse. I speak no English. You're Mayrong? She looked up at William and attempted another smile. You don't speak any English, just Chinese, huh? Mayrong licked her lips. Her eyes never left William's. I speak lots Chinese. Not so much English, but I learn quick. William shifted his weight from foot to foot. He prepared himself for an ugly girl, or a fat girl, or a stupid girl, and had felt ready for any sort of woman he thought might step off the ship. What he hadn't prepared for, and had no idea how to deal with, was a Chinese woman, and a stunningly beautiful one at that. You understand why you're here, right? He held out his hand to take her suitcase. Here, I'll carry that. She passed it to him and dipped her eyes for a moment. Thank you, she said. I am wife, yes? William glanced away. Yeah, he said. I suppose you are. Or you will be, I guess. We need to see the minister and make it all legal, you know. The pastor conducted the wedding quickly and hurried them from his church. Married now, she asked. Married. You okay? You good? She smiled. Okay, she said. You good? William squeezed her hand and smiled. Yeah, we're good. Over the weeks that followed, William and Mayrong grew to know one another. He discovered to his delight that she was an excellent cook. He taught her the lighthouse routine, showing her how to light the lamp and oil the pulley, and the weighted chain system that turned the lamp. Her English improved daily. William learned a little Chinese. His pronunciation never failed to send Mayrong into a fit of good-hearted giggles. Although William had often fantasized about the marriage bed, when reality presented itself, he discovered that he was too shy to hurry into things. Initially, while getting to know Mayrong, he he slept on the floor by the kitchen stove. One night during the 3rd week after their wedding, William was awakened by the sound of the bedroom door creaking open. Outlined in the doorway was Mayron's naked form. Man and wife share bed, Mayron said, edging from darkness into a patch of moonlight that spread across the kitchen floor. Yes? William pulled his blanket closer as he sat up. Yes, he said, though generally folks have had a spell to get to know each other before they get married, right? Yes, she said, taking a step closer. We know now, right? She turned, moonlight dancing along her naked skin. You do like. William struggled to find his breath. You have no idea. Mayron slid beneath the blanket. Together they discovered that sometimes man and wife share the floor, too. For 18 months, William and Mayron settled into married life. Mayron's command of English flourished, and William learned as much Chinese as he could. When they visited South Baymouth to stock up on supplies, Mayron made a point of practicing her English with the locals. She became a favorite of the ladies of South Baymouth, who found her polite, respectful, and charming. The women loved her sly sense of humor, which was always sharp, only slightly risque, and never mean-spirited. Because their wives liked her, the men of South Baymouth took a fatherly shine to the Chinese beauty, married to the quiet lighthouse keeper of Misery Bay. In February of 1908, rising in the morning became a good deal more difficult for Mayron. She was weak but hopeful. Maybe a baby, she told William when he voiced concern. Really? He said with an enormous grin. When will we know? My blood is due next week. We will know if it does not come. Next week arrived, and so did Mayron's blood. She grew steadily weaker, developing a cough that left her aching. On the 1st of March, William hitched the horse to the sledge and bundled Mayron in every blanket they owned. The nearest doctor was near Meldrum Bay, about 3 hours away. The doctor looked Mayron over with increasing concern. After listening to her lungs, he bowed his head. It's consumption, son, he said. How much English does she speak? I speak plenty, Mayron answered. What is consumption? It's a disease, missus, he said, then turned to William. It's in her lungs, son. It's bad. There's got to be some medicine, William said. We don't have much, but we'll pay whatever it takes. There's no medicine. Rest and isolation is what's needed. Perhaps a sanatorium? I'm not sending her away. What can I do? The doctor pulled William closer so that he could whisper without Mayron hearing. Listen, son. She's had this for some time. It hasn't shown itself till now, but it's bad. When it's this bad, folks generally don't get better. You hear what I'm saying? William held back the tears, barely, and nodded. Good. Take her home, keep her comfortable. That's the best you can do. The doctor waved away William's attempts to press some coins into his hand. I pay my debts, William said, stacking the coins on the doctor's table as he bundled up Mayron and headed for the door. Over the following weeks, Mayron had some good days, but there was never any doubt in which direction she was heading. Eventually, the coughing, night chills, and cold sweats were compounded by pneumonia. Just after dawn, on a mild April 14th, Mayron drew with heartbreaking difficulty her last breath while William held her hand. Then we'll skip ahead a bit. After Mayron dies, William buries her close to the lighthouse, and having no coffin, wraps her in sailcloth and buries her deep. Finds that his grief is not manageable by himself, so he eventually ends up going into a nearby town and drinking. But he makes a deal, because he's a responsible man, he makes a deal that come 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he's cut off, he's given food, and put on his way by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so that the light will always be lit and nobody will be in danger because of his drinking. So one time while he's in town, this oiler comes up to him. He's an oiler from one of the steamers who has come back from the Orient. And he hears William's story. And this oiler happens to have a jar, a small cloudy jar with this white sort of paste inside it. And on the jar is a small label, but it has dozens of tiny Chinese characters on it. And the oiler says, I've never met anybody who might have a need for it, but the fellow who gave this to me said that if you use this paste on someone who's passed on, it'll bring them back to life. And William gets upset and he storms out of the bar. But when he gets to where his horse is hitched, he opens his hand and realizes that as he stormed out, he grabbed the jar. And at that point, like I say in the story, William would have done well to just throw it away. But he didn't. Okay, so over the next week, the routine remained the same. At breakfast, William moved food around his plate, picking up the jar several times during each meal. Mayron could have read the characters on that faded label and told him exactly how to use the greasy ointment. The oiler said to smear the paste on Mayron's eyelids, then place her in the earth. There seemed to be an awful lot of symbols on the label for instructions so simple. William knew the character for earth and couldn't find it anywhere on the label. He wished Mayron could help him decide what to do. 9 days after his last visit to the tavern, William stepped out of the cottage. Instead of going to the lighthouse, he strode to the stable. Walking past the square-ended shovel he used for mucking out the stall, he continued to the back. His gaze settled on the spade leaning against the whitewashed wall. The last time he'd held that smooth handle was to bury the most precious thing in his world. He took it in hand now to dig her back up. Just before noon, William hit sailcloth. As gently as he could, he hauled Mayron out of her grave. He thought about unraveling the 3 full wraps of canvas that encased her, but a cursory look at the brownish-yellow stains that saturated the underside of the shroud put that plan to rest. William didn't want to think too hard on those stains. He returned to the house and made himself a lunch of bread and cheese. It reminded him of the day they met and when they shared their first meal together. The memory encouraged a smile, his first since Mayron died. William prepared for the afternoon work. He had a lot to get accomplished before dusk. The first thing he needed was a good, strong knife to liberate Mayron from her canvas shroud. Using his whetstone, he honed the knife to a razor's edge. He pocketed the stone. 3 layers of sailcloth would dull any blade in a hurry. He wrapped the jar in a handkerchief and slid it into the opposite pocket. With a nod, William walked out of the cottage into the noonday sun. William had feared that Mayron would smell right, but her scent was that of wet earth, almost pleasant, at least until he cut through that last layer of canvas. As he split the innermost layer of sailcloth by her feet, there was a kind of sucking sound. A new odor escaped. It wasn't earthly. William turned his head, fighting the urge to retch. Rotting leaves, William decided, though the stench spilling from the open shroud was nothing like rotting leaves. That's exactly what this smells like. Rotting leaves. Mayron was in very bad shape. William knelt on the shroud, now open around her like a chrysalis, like an unfurled chrysalis. The floral print dress he buried her in was melded to what was left of her flesh. When he pulled back the inner layer of canvas, a good deal of Mayron clung to the sailcloth and peeled away. William remained optimistic. Most of her was intact. One last little section. So what happens is...
Okay, hold on. Warning. It gets grosser as we go.
William does the best to his knowledge the instructions that the oiler told him. He was told to put on the eyelids. The eyelids aren't really there, so he does the next best thing, and he wraps her again and buries her shallow this time because he doesn't want her to have to struggle to get out. And a day passes, and the next morning nothing has happened, so he rushes out to the grave, very angry, very upset, not knowing what to do. He thrusts his hands into the earth, and the earth is warm, far warmer than it should be, so he feels that whatever's going on, it's working. So he resists the urge to grab the spade and help her get out. He leaves it, and throughout the day he stays close to the gravesite. And anyway, as the sun sank into the western shore of the lake, he found, actually he goes to bed.
That's right.
And yeah, I forgot about this. He goes to, a long time ago. He goes to bed and he hears a twig tapping at the window, and he seems to hear his name on the wind, but it's nothing. And he goes back to sleep. And in the morning, he comes out. The grave is empty, and the lantern that he hung over the grave is down by the edge of the lake, and there are muddy footprints leading into the lake. So, as the sun sank into the western shore of the lake, he found himself on the stairs of the lighthouse. Rubbing his eyes, William breathed a sigh and plodded up the stairs to fire the light. Everything was in order. Somehow he polished the mirror and set the counterweights and filled the kerosene tank without realizing. Once the flame was lit and the gears set it turning, William opened the door and stepped out onto the platform. Leaning on the rail, he watched the lake swallow the last sliver of daylight. William buried his face in his hands. "Mayron," he said. "William." He raised his head. Like a whisper on the wind, it came again. "William." He turned to the east and looked down. Knee-deep in the water stood a motionless figure. Mayrong! At the sound of her name, Mayrong looked up. When William saw the pulsing blue eyes, he knew it was her. Mayrong, he called and laughed. Stay there, I'll be right down. William rattled down the stairs, flung open the door, and raced to the beach. As he drew nearer, Mayrong shuffled out of the water. Her unblinking, glowing eyes burned with longing. One hand reached out to him. William. Oh, Mayrong, he said, it's been so long. Loose stones scattered as William stumbled to a stop. His eyes grew wide. Mayrong lurched forward. William. Fleshless fingertips clacked together. Pulsing eyes burned brighter as she came closer. Some of the smaller stones stuck to the blackened flesh that clung to her feet, falling off again with each step. Then the smell hit him. She smells nothing like rotting leaves. She smells dead. I am so sorry, Mayrong, William whispered. And then he ran.